They laughed when the offer came in, $10 per acre for land no one wanted. A swamp that swallowed tractors, ruined crops, and drained money year after year. He almost signed without ever stepping foot on it, because numbers had never failed him. But then he saw her standing there, refusing to sell the one thing that had already cost them everything. For the first time in his life, the billionaire who built an empire on seeing hidden value felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. He had spent a lifetime proving land was just math, until this one refused to add up. Ethan Cole didn't believe in sentiment. He believed in numbers, patterns, and margins. Over the past 20 years, he had turned abandoned farmland, contaminated lots, and overlooked acreage into one of the most profitable land investment portfolios in the Midwest. People called it instinct. He called it discipline. So when the swamp showed up on his quarterly asset review, it didn't take him more than 10 seconds to classify it: liability. 10 acres of standing water just outside Ottumwa, no viable crop yield, no development potential, seasonal flooding, maintenance costs that outweighed any theoretical return. Every metric confirmed the same thing: this wasn't land, it was a drain. He leaned back in his office chair, glass walls reflecting the skyline behind him, and circled the file with a pen. Sell. The offer had already come in, $10 per acre. A joke, really, but it was still more than the land had ever produced in decades. The kind of deal you closed quickly, quietly, and forgot about. Except this one came with a complication: his mother. The land was still under her name. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Not since their last call ended the same way it always did, with her refusing to listen and him refusing to argue. It had been like that for years. Not distance in miles, but something colder. A gap built out of choices neither of them had ever fully explained. Still, this was simple. He would drive out, get her signature, and close the deal. One last loose end tied up. By noon the next day he was on the road. The highway gave way to county roads, then gravel, then something that barely qualified as a path. The further he drove, the more the landscape flattened into muted browns and grays. Fields left fallow. Equipment rusting in place, the kind of land he had built a career rescuing or replacing. When he finally pulled up, the truck tires sank slightly into the mud before settling. The swamp stretched out beyond the tree line exactly as the reports described. Still water, thick reeds, a low, sour smell rising from the ground. Nothing about it suggested value. And yet something felt off. He stepped out, boots sinking just enough to remind him this wasn't solid ground. The air was colder here, heavier. Quiet in a way that didn't feel empty, just waiting. Then he saw her. She stood near the edge of the water, bundled in an old coat, hands gloved, posture steady despite the years. She hadn't changed much. Same calm presence, same way of looking at things as if she already understood them long before anyone else asked the question. "You came," she said, not surprised. "I'm here to finish this," he replied, holding up the folder. She didn't look at it. "You didn't need to drive all the way out here to make a mistake." He exhaled slowly. "It's not a mistake, it's dead land. I have an offer, we take it, we're done." She turned slightly, glancing back at the water. "No," she said, "we're not." The conversation should have ended there. It always did. But something caught his attention before he could push further. Behind her, near the edge of the trees, were stacks of burlap sacks, not random, organized. Nearby, a set of tools leaned against a makeshift rack, cutting blades, hooks, and something that looked like a drying frame. He frowned. "What is all this?" "Work," she said simply. "On what?" He gestured toward the swamp. "There's nothing here." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to one of the sacks and opened it slightly. Inside was a pale, fibrous material. Clean, sorted, not debris, not waste, something processed. Ethan stepped closer, crouching slightly. She closed the sack again. "I'm keeping it alive." He straightened, irritation creeping in. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're holding on to something that doesn't make sense. This land has no value. I've run every model, and every model is wrong." She cut in. Silence settled between them. He looked back out over the swamp, seeing it the way he always had, useless, inefficient, forgotten. But now there were details he hadn't noticed before. Paths through the reeds, sections that looked deliberately cut, patterns that didn't belong to wild growth. Someone had been working this land carefully, consistently, for years. You don't understand what this is, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, you don't understand what it isn't. She met his eyes then, and for the first time, there was something different in her expression. Not stubbornness, not even frustration, warning. If you sell this land, she said, her voice steady but firm, you won't just lose money. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. You'll erase something you don't even know exists. Ethan didn't respond right away. The words hung in the air longer than they should have, heavier than they deserved. He had heard variations of that tone before, people clinging to bad decisions, dressing them up as something meaningful. It never changed the outcome. Still, he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped past her and walked toward the edge of the swamp. The ground shifted under his weight, soft but not unstable. He scanned the surface again, slower this time, forcing himself to notice what he had dismissed before. There were patterns, not random growth. Sections of cattails had been cut in clean lines, not torn or trampled. Some areas looked thinner, recently harvested. Others were dense, untouched, like someone had planned it that way. Rotations. He frowned. You've been working this, he said, not looking back at her. I told you, she replied. I'm keeping it alive, that's not what I meant. He turned now, frustration edging into his voice. You're managing it like a crop. She didn't deny it. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his jaw. For what? There's no market for this. No buyer, no distribution. You can't build a business out of weeds. She gave a small, almost tired smile. You'd be surprised what people call useless before they learn how to use it. He shook his head, but something in him shifted just slightly. Not belief, not yet, but doubt, faint and unwelcome. He walked back toward the sacks and crouched again, this time pulling one open himself. The fibers inside were dry, uniform, carefully separated, not something pulled out of mud and thrown aside. This was processed, deliberately. How long have you been doing this? He asked. Long enough to know what it's worth, she said. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're ready for. That irritated him more than it should have. He stood, brushing his hands off. You think I don't understand value? That's what I do. I find what other people miss. Do you? She asked quietly. The question landed harder than anything else she'd said. Ethan looked away, toward the water again. For years, his instincts had been his advantage. He had built everything on being right when others hesitated, being early, being certain, and now standing here none of it fit. Fine, he said after a moment. Let's assume you're right. Let's say there is something here. Why hasn't anyone else figured it out? Why isn't there a report, a study, a buyer offering more than $10 an acre? Her silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional. Then she said there was. He turned back immediately. What? A study, she said. A long time ago. Where is it? She hesitated, and for the first time he saw something close to caution in her expression. It was never filed, she said. That doesn't make sense, Ethan replied. If there was a legitimate survey, environmental, agricultural, anything, it would be in county records. Public access, it should be, she said, but it isn't. He stared at her, mind already moving. Who did it? A man your grandfather trusted. That stopped him. My grandfather? Ethan frowned. He was a farmer, not a developer. He was a survivor, she said. There's a difference. Ethan stepped closer. Start from the beginning. She shook her head slowly. You don't want the beginning. You want the part that proves you right. I want facts. And I want you to listen, she said, her voice firm now. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved across the swamp, bending the reeds in slow waves. Ethan followed the motion with his eyes, and suddenly the land didn't look as still as it had before. It was moving, breathing almost, working. People lived off this land once, she said after a while. Not comfortably, not easily, but they survived because of it. Your grandfather learned how. He wrote things down, kept records. Ethan's attention snapped back. Where are those records? She hesitated again, and that hesitation told him more than her words. You have them, he said. I have some of them, she corrected. Why didn't you show me? Her answer came without hesitation this time. Because you wouldn't have believed me. That stung. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because she wasn't wrong. If she had told him any of this a week ago, about harvesting swamp plants, about hidden value, about undocumented systems, he would have dismissed it in seconds, just like he almost did today. Ethan looked back at the sacks, then at the cutting tools, then out across the water again. How much are you making? He asked. She didn't answer. That matters, he pressed. If this is a business, then there's revenue, buyers, numbers. It's not the kind of business you're used to, she said. That's not an answer. It's the only one that won't make you walk away. That silence again, heavy, controlled. Ethan felt something unfamiliar creeping in, not confusion, not exactly. Loss of control. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, opening his valuation models. He adjusted inputs quickly, hypothetical yields, small-scale output, niche fiber pricing. Even with conservative estimates, the numbers didn't make sense. They didn't match the land's classification at all, which meant one of two things. Either he was overestimating, or someone else had been underestimating it on purpose. Who made the offer? She asked suddenly. Ethan glanced up. A broker, mid-tier firm. They handle rural acquisitions. What's his name? Dalton Reeves. Her reaction was immediate, even if she tried to hide it. A slight tightening around her eyes, a shift in posture. She knew the name. Ethan noticed. You've dealt with him before, he said. She didn't deny it. He's been asking about this land for years, she said quietly. How many years? More than he should have. Ethan's grip tightened slightly around his phone. And you never told me, you never asked. That was true too. He looked down again, mind racing now in a different direction. This wasn't just about misjudged land anymore. There was a pattern forming and it didn't sit right. A worthless swamp, a lowball offer, a broker pushing to close quickly, a missing report, and a history that no one had bothered to explain. Ethan turned back toward her, sharper this time. If there was a survey and it showed anything close to what you're implying, then someone had a reason to keep it quiet. She met his eyes. Yes, why? Her answer came slowly. Because if people knew what this land could do, she said, they wouldn't be able to buy it for $10 an acre. Ethan felt something shift fully this time. Not doubt, suspicion. He looked out across the swamp again, but now it didn't look worthless at all. It looked hidden, carefully, intentionally. And for the first time since he arrived, he wasn't thinking about selling. He was thinking about who had already tried to take it. Then he looked back at her. Show me the records, he said. She didn't move. Instead, she said something that made his chest tighten in a way numbers never had. I will, she said. But once you see them, you won't be able to pretend you didn't know. Ethan held her gaze. I'm not pretending anything. She shook her head slightly. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Then she turned and started walking toward the tree line, toward a small, weathered structure he hadn't noticed before. Ethan followed. Because now, for the first time, the land wasn't the only thing that didn't make sense. And whatever was hidden inside that structure had been kept from him on purpose. The structure was smaller than it looked from a distance. Up close, it leaned slightly to one side, its wood warped by years of weather. The door creaked when she pushed it open, not from disuse, but from repetition. This wasn't abandoned. It was used quietly, deliberately. Ethan stepped inside behind her and stopped. The air smelled dry, almost earthy, nothing like the swamp outside. Light filtered through a narrow window, just enough to reveal shelves along the walls. Not cluttered, organized. That was the first thing that unsettled him. Everything had its place. Bundles of dried cattails hung in rows, labeled, stacked, some tied tighter than others, separated by thickness, by color, by texture. There were crates filled with roots, cleaned and sorted. A small scale sat on a work table, next to a worn ledger. This wasn't survival. This was a system. Ethan walked slowly along the shelves, running his fingers across one of the labels. Dates, quantities, notes written in tight, consistent handwriting. You track all of this? He asked. I always have, she said. For what? He pressed again. There's no official buyer for this, no contracts, no invoices. She moved past him and reached for the ledger, flipping it open without hesitation. You keep looking for the kind of proof you're used to. That's not how this works. Ethan stepped closer, glancing down at the pages. Transactions, not large ones, not corporate, but steady, names he didn't recognize, small amounts, repeated over time, barter notes, exchanges, local trades. He frowned. This isn't scalable. I never said it was, she replied. Then it's not a business. It's just activity. She closed the ledger slowly and looked at him. It kept this land alive when nothing else could. That's not the same thing. It is when you don't have another option. The words hit harder than he expected, not because of what they meant, but because of what they implied. He hadn't been here, not really. Ethan looked back at the shelves, seeing them differently now. Not as inefficiency, but as persistence. Years of it. Quiet work that never made it into any report, any valuation model, any dataset he had ever relied on. And yet it existed. Right here. How much of this is from your father, he asked, more carefully this time. My father started it, she said. I continued it. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing that. And the survey? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to a corner of the room, where a wooden chest sat against the wall. It looked older than everything else. More worn, more guarded. She rested her hand on it for a moment before opening it. Inside were folders, not many, but thick, handwritten notes, maps, old paper worn at the edges. Ethan stepped closer, drawn in despite himself. She pulled one out and handed it to him. Start there, she said. Ethan took it, feeling the weight of it more than he expected. He opened the folder carefully, scanning the first page. It wasn't what he thought it would be. Not a formal report, not typed, not stamped, handwritten. Detailed but not formatted like anything he'd ever worked with. Observations, measurements, seasonal notes, yield estimates not in dollars but in volume. Use cases scribbled in margins. He flipped to another page. Diagrams of root systems, notes about harvesting cycles, comparisons between wet and dry seasons, everything specific, everything deliberate. This isn't official, he said. No, she agreed. It's accurate. That's not the same thing. It was enough for him, she said. Ethan kept reading, his skepticism still there but quieter now, because the more he looked, the harder it was to dismiss. The data wasn't polished, but it was consistent. Repeated patterns, long-term tracking, years of it, decades maybe. Why didn't he publish this? Ethan asked. If this was real, if it had value, why keep it like this? She hesitated, because not everyone who looks at land wants to use it, she said. Some people just want to take it. Ethan looked up at her. That doesn't answer the question. It does if you understand the risk, she replied. He frowned, flipping another page. This one had a map, rough but clear enough. Sections of the swamp marked differently. Some areas circled, others crossed out. Rotations again, intentional. He traced one of the marked sections with his finger. These zones, they're not random. No, she said, they never were. Ethan exhaled slowly. His mind was working now, connecting pieces he didn't want to connect. If this was even partially accurate, then the land wasn't just undervalued. It was misclassified. Deliberately. Who else has seen this, he asked. Very few people, she said. Why? She met his eyes again. Because every time someone important got close, they tried to buy it. That settled into him like a weight. Ethan closed the folder halfway, thinking. Not reacting, thinking. Because this wasn't just about his mother anymore. This was about a pattern. Offers that came too easily. Pressure that didn't match the land's supposed value. And now, missing records that should have existed. Dalton Reeves, he said quietly. She didn't respond, but she didn't need to. Ethan looked back down at the folder, flipping to the last few pages. That's when he saw it. A name, not handwritten, typed, different from the rest. He stilled. This isn't your father's writing, he said. No, she said. Ethan's pulse shifted just slightly. Then whose is it? She took a breath as if deciding something. That was added later, she said. By who? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into the chest again and pulled out a second folder. This one thinner, cleaner, more official. She held it for a moment, then handed it to him. Ethan took it, already knowing this was different. He opened it. This one was typed. Structured, a real survey, environmental classification, resource density, yield projections, professional, legitimate. His eyes moved quickly across the page, then slowed, then stopped. Because the numbers didn't match the land's current classification. Not even close. This shows positive yield, he said, barely above a whisper. Yes. High yield, he corrected, reading further. Renewable, scalable at a niche level. His voice trailed off. This was everything his system would have flagged. Everything that would have turned this from a liability into an acquisition target. Everything that should have been in public records. But wasn't. Why isn't this filed, he asked, sharper now. She didn't hesitate this time. Because it was never meant to be seen, she said. Ethan looked up, something colder settling into place. Who wrote this? Her answer came slowly. The same company that's trying to buy the land now. Silence filled the room. Ethan looked back down at the report, then at the name printed at the top of the page. His eyes narrowed. Because it wasn't just any company. It was the parent firm behind Dalton Reeves' operation, and the date on the report was nearly 20 years old. Ethan felt the shift fully now, not doubt, not confusion, certainty, but not the kind he was used to. This one came with a different question, not what the land was worth, but how long someone had been making sure no one else ever found out. He closed the folder slowly, then looked at his mother. "How many times have they tried to buy this?" he asked. Her answer didn't come right away, and when it did, it changed everything enough, she said quietly, that I stopped counting. Ethan didn't respond right away. The number, unknown, undefined, sat heavier than any figure he had ever analyzed. He had built entire strategies on patterns, on predictable behavior. But this was persistence without visibility, pressure without record. A long game played quietly. Over years he hadn't even been paying attention. He looked down again at the report in his hands, then back at his mother. "They kept coming," he said slowly. "Different offers, different people, but always the same company behind it." She nodded once, "And every time you said no." "I didn't always say no right away," she said. "Sometimes I needed time. Sometimes I needed to understand what they were really asking for." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "They never asked for just the land," she said. "They asked for access, for testing rights, for temporary use. They wanted to be here before they owned it." That landed differently. Ethan had seen that tactic before, early-stage resource probing disguised as harmless preliminary work, a way to confirm value before committing to a full acquisition. Except here they had already known the value, which meant everything else had been theater. They weren't guessing, he said. They already had the data, yes, and they still tried to buy it for nothing, yes. Ethan exhaled through his nose, sharper now. "That's not negotiation, that's manipulation. It's patience," she corrected quietly. The word lingered longer than he expected. Patience meant planning. It meant strategy. It meant someone had been willing to wait years, decades even, for the right moment to take this land, and he had almost given it to them. Ethan set the report down on the table, his mind moving faster now, reassembling everything he thought he knew. The offer, the urgency, the missing records, the pressure to sign quickly. None of it had been random. He pulled out his phone and stepped outside the small structure, the swamp stretching behind him in quiet defiance of everything he used to believe about it. The signal flickered, weak but usable. He scrolled through his contacts and stopped on a name, Caleb Mercer. Not a friend, not exactly, but someone who had spent the last 15 years working environmental compliance for state-level projects. Someone who understood how reports moved, or didn't move, through official systems. Ethan hesitated for half a second, then called. Caleb picked up on the third ring. "Didn't expect to hear from you out there. I need a favor," Ethan said. "That depends on what kind. I need to know if a wetlands survey from about 20 years ago was ever filed at the state level. Private contractor, high-yield classification." There was a pause. "Not long, but enough." "That's specific," Caleb said. "You have a report?" "I have something," Ethan replied, "but it's not in any public database." Another pause, then a shift in tone. "If it should have been filed and wasn't, that's not an oversight. That's a decision," I figured. "You send me whatever you've got. I'll cross-check internal logs. No promises, it's old." "I don't need promises," Ethan said. "I need to know if it was buried." Caleb exhaled lightly. "All right, send it." Ethan ended the call and stood there for a moment, looking out over the swamp. The water moved slightly with the wind, the cattails bending in slow, almost deliberate waves. It didn't look like profit. It looked like something he had been trained to ignore. He went back inside. His mother hadn't moved far. She was standing near the shelves again, checking one of the bundles, adjusting it slightly like she had done it 1,000 times before. "I called someone," he said. "I assumed you would." "He's going to check if this report was ever filed," Ethan added. "If it wasn't, that confirms intent." She nodded, but her expression didn't change. "And then what?" Ethan paused. That was the question he hadn't fully answered yet. "Then we decide what to do with it," he said. "We?" she asked. He met her eyes. "You didn't keep this land alone just to hand it off now." Something in her expression shifted. Not fully, not trust, but recognition. "You're starting to understand," she said. "I'm starting to realize how much I didn't," he admitted. The honesty surprised even him. He walked back to the table and picked up the report again, this time more carefully. Not as a document to verify, but as something that had been hidden for a reason. Did anyone else ever see this, he asked. One person, she said. Ethan looked up. Who? She hesitated again, longer this time. He was part of the original survey team, she said. Not the lead, just someone who stayed behind when the others left. And he told my father they weren't going to file it, she continued, that it would disappear. Ethan felt his chest tighten slightly. Why would he tell him that? Because he didn't agree with it, she said. Because he knew what it meant. And where is he now? Her answer came slower. I don't know. Ethan stared at her. You never tried to find him? I didn't need to, she said. I had what I needed. That's not how this works, Ethan replied, sharper than he intended. If we're going to prove this, if we're going to stop them, we need more than notes and one buried report. She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. You think this is about proving something, she said. It's not. It's about protecting it. It can be both, Ethan said. And if proving it puts it at risk, she asked. That stopped him. Because she wasn't wrong. Exposure brought attention. Attention brought interest. And interest, especially from the kind of company already circling, brought escalation. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the small space. He wasn't used to problems that didn't have a clean solution. Problems where every move created a new vulnerability. We don't get to stay quiet anymore, he said finally. They already know. They've known for years. The only reason they haven't taken it is because they've been waiting for the right moment. And you think that moment is now, she asked. I think I almost gave it to them, he said. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before it. His phone buzzed. Ethan looked down. Caleb, he answered immediately. That was fast. It had to be, Caleb said, voice lower now. I found something. Ethan stepped outside again, instinctively putting distance between the call and the room behind him. What did you find? There's a record of the survey being commissioned, Caleb said. Logged. Paid for. Everything checks out. Ethan's jaw tightened. And the report? Never filed, Caleb said. That's what we expected. No, Caleb replied, you don't understand. Ethan frowned. Then explain. There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation, calculation. It wasn't just not filed, Caleb said. It was flagged internally. Flagged how? Restricted access. Non-public classification. That doesn't happen for agricultural surveys unless what? Ethan cut in. Unless the data is considered strategically sensitive, Caleb finished. Ethan went still. Strategically sensitive, not overlooked, not forgotten, hidden, on purpose. And there's something else, Caleb added. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. What? The access log, Caleb said. There's only one person who's pulled that file in the last 15 years. Ethan's chest tightened again, sharper this time. Who? He asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. And when he finally did, Ethan felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he understood. It wasn't the company, Caleb said. It was someone from your own family. Ethan didn't speak for a long second. The wind moved through the cattails again, soft and steady, like nothing had changed. But everything had. The swamp no longer felt like land. It felt like evidence. Say that again, he said quietly. Caleb's voice came through the phone, steady but lower now. The access log. Pulled the restricted file 3 times over the last 15 years. Ethan's throat tightened. Who? I can't give you the name over the phone, Caleb said. Not yet. That's not good enough. It has to be, Caleb replied. If I'm right about what this isn't just a buried report. This is internal suppression tied to private acquisition strategy. You start throwing names around without proof, you'll get shut down before you even understand what you're dealing with. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, forcing himself to slow down. Then tell me this, do I know them? A pause. Yes. The word landed harder than anything else. Ethan opened his eyes again, staring out at the water. His mind moved quickly, scanning through every name connected to the land. Family, extended family, people who had ever had access, anyone who could have known what this swamp really was. And one realization rose faster than the others. They didn't just know, he said slowly. They kept watching. Caleb didn't disagree. You need to be careful, Caleb said. Whoever accessed that file, they didn't report it. They didn't escalate it. They just looked. Why would someone do that? Ethan asked. Because they didn't want to trigger anything, Caleb said. No alerts, no flags, just information. Ethan's grip tightened around the phone. Or because they were waiting. Exactly. The call ended shortly after, with Caleb promising to pull whatever additional metadata he could without raising attention. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, the silence now heavier than before. Someone in his own family had known, not guessed, not suspected, known, and said nothing. He walked back inside the structure slowly. His mother was still near the shelves, but she wasn't working anymore. She was watching him. She had seen the shift. "What did he say?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He set his phone down on the table next to the report and looked at her directly. "Someone in the family accessed the original survey," he said. "Multiple times." Her expression didn't change the way he expected. No shock, no confusion, just something quieter. "Recognition. Do you know who?" she asked. "Not yet," he said, "but I will." She nodded once, then looked away toward the chest again. "That doesn't surprise me," she said. Ethan stared at her. "You already knew that was possible?" "I knew someone else had been watching," she said. "You don't get that many offers without someone feeding information back. And you never told me?" She met his eyes again. "You weren't listening." The words cut clean, not angry, not loud, just true. Ethan looked away first this time, his jaw tightening. Because she wasn't wrong, he hadn't been listening. Not to her, not to anything that didn't fit into the systems he trusted. And someone else had taken advantage of that. He turned back toward the table and opened the official report again, scanning the details more carefully now. Not just the numbers, but the structure, the formatting, the signatures. "Who had access to the land records?" he asked. She shrugged slightly. "Family, some of your father's side. A few people who helped with paperwork years ago. Names," Ethan said. She hesitated. "Why?" "Because one of them knew exactly what this land was worth," he said. "And instead of protecting it, they watched it almost get sold." Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. Finally, she stepped closer and leaned against the edge of the table. "There's one person," she said, "but I never had proof." Ethan's focus sharpened instantly. "Who?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to the chest again and knelt beside it, opening it slowly this time. She moved past the survey notes, past the older folders, and reached deeper. When she pulled something out, it wasn't a document, it was a photograph, old, slightly faded, but preserved. She stood and handed it to him. Ethan took it carefully. 3 adults stood in the photo. One he recognized immediately, his grandfather, younger but unmistakable. Next to him stood a man in a field jacket holding a clipboard. The third stood slightly behind them, half turned toward the camera. Ethan frowned. "I don't know this person," he said. "You should," she replied. He looked closer. The angle was awkward, but there was something familiar in the posture, the stance, the way the man held himself, like he didn't quite belong in the frame but refused to step out of it. Ethan's mind started connecting pieces again. "That's from the survey," he said. "Yes, the team, yes. And the one who stayed behind," she nodded. Ethan looked back at the third man again, his focus narrowing. "Why would someone from that team still have access years later?" he asked. "Because he didn't leave the work," she said. "He just changed sides. That landed differently. Not just observation, involvement." Ethan's chest tightened again. "You think he stayed connected to the company?" "I think he never disconnected," she said. Ethan looked back down at the photo, then at the report on the table, then back at her. "And you think someone in the family knows him?" "I think someone introduced him," she said quietly. That shifted everything, because now it wasn't just passive knowledge. It was a connection, a bridge between the family and the company that had been circling the land for decades. Ethan set the photo down slowly, his mind moving faster now, sharper. "This isn't random," he said. "This isn't just someone checking a file. This is someone tracking the land, feeding information, waiting for the right moment, yes. And that moment was now," he added. "When I showed up ready to sell." Her silence confirmed it. Ethan exhaled slowly, the realization settling deeper. He hadn't just almost made a mistake, he had almost completed someone else's plan. He picked up his phone again, scrolling through contacts, not for Caleb this time, but for something else. Someone closer, someone with a name that had always been just background. Until now, he stopped on it, didn't call yet. Instead, he looked back at his mother. "If I find out who it is, what do you want me to do?" She didn't hesitate this time. "Don't let them take it," she said. "That's not what I asked." "I know," she replied. "But that's the only part that matters." Ethan nodded slowly. Then he looked back down at the photo one more time, at the third man, at the connection he hadn't seen before, and then at the name on his phone. Because suddenly it didn't feel like a guess anymore. It felt like a memory he had ignored. He hit call, the line rang once twice, then clicked. A voice answered. And Ethan didn't introduce himself. He just asked one question. Why were you looking at that survey? The line didn't go silent right away. Whoever was on the other end didn't hang up. They didn't deny it either. They just breathed. Slow, controlled, and that was enough. Ethan didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The question had already landed exactly where it needed to. Finally the voice came back. You shouldn't be asking that, the man said. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. Ethan's chest tightened. So it's true, a pause. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The air between them thickened, even across the distance of the call. Ethan could hear something shifting on the other end, papers maybe, or a chair scraping lightly against the floor. You're making assumptions, the man said. Ethan let out a short breath, almost laugh, but there was no humor in it. No, I've been making assumptions my whole life. That's the problem. Silence again. Then, quieter this time, the man spoke.
Where are you right now?
Ethan's eyes flicked briefly toward the doorway, toward the land beyond it. Standing on the piece of land you've been watching for years, another pause. Longer and heavier. That land, the man said slowly, was never what you thought it was. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know that now, do you? The man asked. Because if you did, you wouldn't be calling me like this. There it was, not denial, deflection. Ethan leaned slightly against the table, steadying himself. You accessed a restricted environmental survey multiple times. You never reported it. You never disclosed it. And somehow the same company you've been consulting for has been trying to buy this land for decades. He stopped, then added, quieter but sharper, that's not coincidence. The man didn't respond immediately. When he did, his tone had changed, less guarded, more tired. You always were good at connecting numbers, he said. Ethan's grip tightened again. This isn't about numbers anymore. No, the man agreed. It isn't. A shift, subtle but real. Ethan felt it. You want to know why I looked at that survey? The man asked. Yes, another pause. Because your grandfather didn't finish what he started. Ethan blinked. That wasn't the answer he expected. What does that mean? He asked. It means, the man continued, that what he documented wasn't complete. It was a beginning, not a conclusion. Ethan's mind moved quickly, replaying the report, the notes, the margins filled with handwriting that didn't belong to any system. You're saying the land is worth more than what's in that report? Ethan said. I'm saying the report barely scratches the surface, the man replied. Ethan straightened slightly. Then why bury it? This time the answer came faster. Because the moment it becomes public, it doesn't belong to your family anymore. That landed harder than anything else so far. Ethan's thoughts sharpened instantly. That's not how land ownership works. No, the man said, but it is how leverage works. Silence again. Ethan's pulse picked up, his mind racing through possibilities, regulatory classification, environmental protections, resource designation. Any one of those could shift control away from private ownership. You're talking about reclassification, Ethan said slowly. I'm talking about exposure, the man corrected. You think you've been fighting to keep the land from being sold. But the truth is, the moment the full value is proven, you'll be fighting to keep it at all. Ethan glanced instinctively toward the chest, toward the report lying open on the table. That's why you never filed it, he said. No, the man replied. That's why it was never meant to be filed. Ethan frowned. Then why access it at all? Another pause, longer this time, and when the man spoke again, his voice had dropped lower. To see if anyone else had figured it out yet. That answer chilled something in Ethan's chest. Because it wasn't about profit. It was about timing. You were waiting, Ethan said. Yes. For what? For someone like you, the man said. Ethan went still. That's supposed to mean something? It means, the man continued, someone who understands scale. Someone who knows how to turn overlooked systems into structured operations. Someone who could take what your grandfather started and actually make it visible. Ethan felt a flicker of anger rise. So you let it sit, for decades, while my mother struggled to keep it. I didn't let anything happen, the man said sharply. I stayed out of it, that's the same thing. No, the man replied, just as sharply. It's not. If I had pushed it forward back then, your family would lost it before you even understood what it was. Ethan's thoughts stalled for a moment, because part of that made sense. But it didn't make it right. You could have told us, Ethan said. I couldn't, the man replied. Why not? Another silence. This one felt different, heavier. And when the answer came, it was quieter than anything before. Because I wasn't just part of the survey team. Ethan's chest tightened again. What were you? A breath. Then I was the one who brought the company to your land in the first place. The words hit harder than anything else. Not an outsider. Not just an observer. The beginning. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. So this whole thing, every offer, every attempt to buy, it traces back to you. Yes. And you just watched it play out. I made sure it didn't succeed, the man said. Ethan's voice dropped. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to understand that if I hadn't intervened quietly over the years, that land would already be gone. Ethan's mind reeled, trying to reconcile the contradiction, the offers, the pressure, the suppression, the access logs. You were protecting it, he said slowly. I was protecting the timing, the man corrected. That's not the same thing. No, the man agreed. It isn't. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the photo on the table. The third figure, the one half turned, half hidden. Now it wasn't just a face, it was a role. A position inside everything that had happened. You'd said my grandfather didn't finish what he started, Ethan said. What exactly did he start? The man exhaled slowly. And for the first time since the call began, there was hesitation. Not avoidance, something closer to caution. He was mapping something bigger than a cattail economy, the man said. Something that connects multiple wetlands across county lines. A system that, if developed correctly, wouldn't just be profitable, it would be protected. Ethan's pulse spiked again. Protected how? Federal designation, the man said. That changed everything, because federal designation meant oversight, restrictions, public interest, control. Then why didn't he finish it, Ethan asked. The answer came immediately, because someone stopped him. Ethan froze. Who? Silence. Then you're asking the wrong question. Ethan's voice sharpened. Then what's the right one? A pause. And then quietly, why did your family never talk about what happened to him right before he stopped? Ethan's breath caught. Because suddenly this wasn't just about land anymore, and the past he thought he understood was missing something. Something big enough to silence an entire family. The line went dead, and Ethan stood there, staring at the phone in his hand, realizing the next truth he needed wasn't in a report. It was buried in a story no one had ever told him. Ethan stood still long after the call ended, the silence pressing in harder than the voice had. The phone hung loosely in his hand, but his mind was no longer in the present. It was already moving backward, through years of conversations that never happened, questions he never asked, and stories that had somehow been erased before they were ever told. He turned slowly toward the house. For the first time since arriving, the swamp behind him felt less like the mystery and more like the consequence. Inside, the air felt different. Still quiet, but heavier now, like the walls had been holding something in for years and were finally close to giving it up. The chest sat exactly where he had left it, the report still open, the old photograph resting beside it like a witness waiting to be questioned again. Ethan stepped closer. He picked up the photo. This time, he didn't just look at the faces. He studied the posture, the space between them, the direction of their bodies. His grandfather stood slightly angled, one hand raised as if explaining something. His mother stood beside him, watching. But the third man, half turned, slightly apart, wasn't just present, he was positioned. Like someone who didn't belong completely inside the moment. Ethan's jaw tightened. The call replayed in his mind. I was the one who brought the company to your land. The words settled deeper now. Not an outsider, an origin point. Ethan set the photo down and reached for the stack of notes again, flipping through pages more quickly this time. His eyes scanned past measurements and yield estimates, searching for something else, anything that connected the dots between what his grandfather started and what had been buried. Most of the handwriting was consistent, structured, precise, but then scattered across the margins there were differences, slight changes in pressure, different slants, additions, not corrections. Ethan slowed down. He pulled one sheet free and held it closer to the light, a cluster of notes in the margin, short, almost coded phrases, phase extension beyond boundary. Waterline variation, potential expansion, external observation risk. Ethan frowned. That last one didn't sound like research, it sounded like caution. He flipped to another page, more notes, same pattern, but then he found something else. A page that didn't match the rest. The paper was slightly different, thicker, more worn, and the handwriting on it wasn't his grandfather's. Ethan's pulse ticked upward. He leaned in. The notes were shorter, more direct. Do not file, too early. Wait until full mapping complete. At the bottom there was a mark, not a full signature, just initials. Ethan stared at them. They didn't match his grandfather's, and they didn't match his mother's, which meant someone else had been involved. He exhaled slowly, the realization settling in. The survey wasn't just unfinished. It had been deliberately held back. Ethan straightened, his thoughts shifting again, this time towards something more immediate. He needed confirmation, not theory, not assumptions, proof. He pulled out his phone and opened his contacts, scrolling until he found a name he hadn't used in years. A former colleague, someone who had moved into regulatory consulting after leaving the private sector. Someone who understood how land classification actually worked once federal interest entered the equation. He hesitated for only a second before pressing call. It rang twice, 3 times, then picked up. Ethan? The voice on the other end sounded surprised. Didn't expect to hear from you. I need a quick answer, Ethan said. No small talk, no easing into it. Hypothetically, if a wetland is proven to support a multi-county renewable resource system, what happens? A pause. That's not a small hypothetical, the man replied. Just answer. Another pause, shorter this time. Depends on the scale. But if it's significant enough, you're looking at federal review, environmental protection status, possibly restricted development. Ethan's grip tightened. And ownership? You still own it, the man said. But control? That gets complicated. You don't just do whatever you want anymore. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The pieces were locking into place faster now. And if someone knew that ahead of time, he asked, if they had data proving it, then they'd either sit on it, the man replied, or they'd position themselves to benefit before anyone else found out. Ethan's jaw tightened, even if it meant keeping the land undervalued. That's the whole point, the man said. You don't want attention until you're ready. Ethan ended the call without another word. The silence returned immediately, but now it felt different, sharper, more focused. He turned back toward the table, toward the notes, toward the photograph, toward everything that had been hidden in plain sight. And then he heard the door. Not loud, but enough. Ethan's head snapped up as it opened behind him. His mother stepped inside, her expression unreadable at first. She closed the door slowly, her eyes already fixed on the table. On the notes, on the photo, on him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she walked forward, her gaze dropping briefly to the page Ethan still held. You weren't supposed to find that one yet, she said quietly. Ethan's chest tightened. How many more are there? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached past him and lifted the photograph, holding it in her hands for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Softer, but heavier. That man you talked to, she said, still looking at the photo. He didn't tell you everything. Ethan stepped closer. Then you do. She finally looked up at him. And for the first time since he had arrived, there was something in her eyes that wasn't just resistance. It was decision. He told you he brought the company here, she said. Ethan nodded. She held his gaze. What he didn't tell you is why your grandfather stopped trusting him. Ethan's breath slowed. Then tell me, he said. She hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough to feel the weight of what came next. When your grandfather realized what the land really was, she said slowly, he tried to protect it. Ethan didn't move. And that man, she continued, he tried to claim it. The words landed quietly, but they hit harder than anything else so far. Ethan's voice dropped. You're saying he switched sides? I'm saying, she replied, he never picked one. Silence filled the room again, thicker now, because the line between protector and threat had just disappeared. Ethan's mind raced, trying to reconcile everything, the hidden report, the suppressed data, the decades of offers, the quiet resistance. Then why didn't you expose him? He asked. Her expression didn't change. Because I didn't have proof, she said. Ethan glanced down at the page in his hand. You do now. She shook her head. Not enough. Ethan frowned. What's missing? She looked at him carefully, and then said, the part he made sure no one would ever find. Ethan felt something shift again, something deeper, because this wasn't just about what had been hidden. It was about what had been taken. What part? He asked. Her grip tightened slightly on the photograph, and when she answered, her voice dropped to almost a whisper. The original map. Ethan froze, because suddenly everything they had found wasn't the truth, it was just what was left behind, the original map. The words didn't just sit in the air, they rearranged everything Ethan thought he understood. He stared at his mother, trying to measure whether this was another piece of the truth, or the center of it. "What map?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked past him, placing the photograph back on the table with careful hands like it carried more than memory. Then she moved toward the old cabinet by the wall. Ethan watched her closely now, every movement sharpened by suspicion and urgency. This wasn't the same quiet resistance she had shown before. This was something else, a decision that had already been made before he even asked the question. She opened the cabinet and pulled out a small metal box, dented, worn, and clearly older than anything else in the room. She brought it back to the table and set it down. For a moment, she didn't open it. "You think what you found in that chest is everything," she said. "It isn't. It's what your grandfather left behind after he realized he couldn't keep the rest safe." Ethan's chest tightened. "Safe from who?" She met his eyes. "You already know the answer to that." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't need to. She opened the box. Inside, there were fewer papers than he expected. No thick stacks, no complete files, just fragments, torn edges, sections that looked like they had been removed from something larger, deliberately. Ethan leaned closer. "These are pieces," he said. "They're what survived," she corrected. He picked one up carefully. It wasn't a full document, more like a section of a map, hand-drawn lines, shaded areas, markings that didn't match standard survey formats. "This isn't just our land," Ethan said, his voice lowering. "No," she replied. "It never was." His eyes moved across the page, following the lines as they extended beyond the boundaries he knew. The swamp wasn't isolated. It was connected, flowing outward, branching into other wetlands, crossing property lines, reaching into places that had never been part of their family's holdings. "This is what he was mapping," Ethan said. She nodded. "A system." Ethan swallowed, the weight of it settling deeper. "Then the land isn't valuable because of what's on it. It's valuable because of what it connects to," she said. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't confusion, it was clarity, and it was dangerous. Ethan set the fragment down carefully. "If this is real, if this map is accurate, then whoever controls even part of it, they don't need all of it," she finished. "Just enough." Ethan's mind snapped forward. The offers, the pressure, the timing. They weren't trying to buy the swamp because it was worthless, he said. They were trying to secure a piece of something bigger. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ethan's jaw tightened. And the man on the phone, he knew this, yes, and he still let them keep coming after it. He didn't let them, she said quietly. He made sure they never got far enough. Ethan shook his head, frustration building again. "That doesn't make him a protector." "No," she said. "It makes him someone who wanted control." The distinction hit harder than he expected. Ethan paced once across the room, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "Why didn't you show me this before?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because you would sold it anyway." The words landed clean, brutal, and true. Ethan didn't argue this time. He couldn't. He knew exactly what version of himself she was talking about. The one who trusted models over people, data over experience, profit over anything that didn't fit neatly into a projection. "I didn't know," he said. "I know," she replied. That was the worst part. There was no accusation in her voice. Just fact. Ethan looked back at the fragments, his mind already shifting again, this time not as an analyst but as someone trying to understand how much damage had already been done. "How much of the map is missing?" he asked. "Most of it." His stomach tightened. "Where is it?" She hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. "You don't have it," he realized. "No." "Then who does?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the box again and pulled out one last piece, smaller than the others, folded tightly as if it had been hidden separately for a reason. She handed it to him. Ethan unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a map, it was a letter, short, direct, written in the same unfamiliar handwriting he had seen in the margins earlier. He read it silently at first, then again, slower. "You're sure you want to keep going with this?" He read under his breath. "Because once it's complete, there's no going back. Not for you, not for them." Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't just documentation, it was a warning. At the bottom, the same initials appeared again, the same person, the same presence woven through everything. He wasn't just helping, Ethan said, he was guiding it, yes. And then he took it. Her silence confirmed it. Ethan's grip on the paper tightened. Why didn't you stop him? Her eyes flickered with something, pain, maybe, or something older than that. Because by the time we realized what he was doing, she said it was already gone. Ethan looked up sharply. Gone where? I don't know, she said. But I know this, he didn't destroy it. Ethan frowned. How can you be sure? Because if he had, she said, none of this would matter anymore. Ethan's mind raced. If the map still existed, then it wasn't just evidence. It was leverage, power, control over something that extended far beyond their land. Then he's still holding it, Ethan said. Yes, and waiting. She didn't respond. But the truth was already there. Ethan looked down at the fragments again, then back at the photograph, then at the letter in his hand. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. This wasn't over. It had never been over. It had just been waiting. Ethan folded the letter carefully and set it back on the table. His movements were slower now, more deliberate. Because for the first time since this started, he understood the scale of what they were standing in the middle of. This isn't about selling or keeping the land anymore, he said. No, she agreed. It's about who gets to define what it becomes. Her eyes held his. Yes. Ethan exhaled slowly, then reached for his phone again. This time there was no hesitation. He scrolled back to the number from earlier and pressed call. It rang once, then twice, then connected. You said you were waiting, Ethan said, his voice steady now. A pause on the other end. Yes. Ethan looked at the map, fragments spread across the table. At what point were you planning to come back and finish it? Silence, longer than before. Then the man's voice returned, low, measured. I wasn't planning to. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then why wait at all? Another pause. And then something changed, because the man said slowly, I needed to know if you would figure it out first. Ethan's grip tightened. And now that I have, the answer came without hesitation. Now the man said, we need to talk in person. Ethan's jaw set. About what? A breath. And then, about the part of the map your grandfather never told your mother about. Ethan went still, because suddenly, this wasn't just something that had been taken. There was a piece of it that had never been given at all. Ethan didn't speak again until the call ended. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and charged, as if the air itself had shifted. His mother watched him, not with fear, but with something steadier, something that had already survived this kind of moment before. He wants to meet, Ethan said finally. She nodded once. Of course he does. Ethan slipped his phone into his pocket, his mind moving faster now, assembling pieces that no longer felt abstract. The map fragments, the letter, the suppressed reports, the pressure to sell, it all pointed in one direction, control. But now there was something worse, an unknown piece. He said there's a part of the map my grandfather never told you about, Ethan said. You believe that? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. I believe your grandfather didn't trust anyone with everything. Ethan studied her face. Not even you? A flicker of something crossed her expression, hurt, maybe, but not surprise. No, she said. Especially not me. That answer landed deeper than Ethan expected, not because it was shocking, but because it made sense. He turned away, pacing once again, slower this time, thinking through implications rather than reacting to them. If there's another section, something he kept separate, then this whole system isn't just about harvesting. No, she said quietly. Ethan stopped. Then what is it about? She hesitated, and for the first time since he had found the chest, Ethan realized something else. She didn't know everything either. That changed the balance again. Ethan exhaled slowly. We can't go into that meeting blind. We won't, she replied. He turned back toward the table, scanning the fragments again. Every line, every marking now felt incomplete, like trying to understand a map with half the directions missing. Who was he? Ethan asked. The man your father trusted enough to help build this, but not enough to give everything to. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down at the table, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the metal box. He wasn't someone your grandfather trusted, she said finally. Ethan frowned. Then why involve him at all? Because he needed someone who understood what he was building, she said. And there weren't many people who did. Ethan leaned forward. So he was an expert. Yes. In what? She looked up at him. Not land, she said. Patterns. Ethan, patterns? He studied how things connect, she said, water systems, plant cycles, how small ecosystems feed into larger ones. He wasn't interested in ownership, he was interested in structure. Ethan felt something click into place. This isn't just a resource map, he said slowly, it's a system map, predictive, scalable, yes, and if someone controlled enough of it, they could decide how it gets used, she finished. Ethan's pulse quickened, not just profit, not just land, influence. He stepped back, the realization settling deeper. Then why walk away? If he understood all of this, why disappear? Her eyes darkened slightly. He didn't walk away, she said. He took what he needed and made sure no one else could finish it. Ethan stared at her. That's not protection. No, she agreed. That's control. The word echoed in Ethan's mind. Control. The same word that had defined his own career. The same instinct he had used to build his empire. For the first time it felt different, uncomfortable. He rubbed his jaw, thinking, if he's been sitting on this for years, why come back now? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the window, toward the swamp stretching beyond the house. Because something changed, she said. Ethan followed her gaze. What? She turned back to him. You. The word hit harder than anything else. Ethan frowned. Me? You started buying land around here, she said, quietly at first, then faster, larger pieces. You didn't know what you were building toward, but he did. Ethan's stomach tightened. He thought I was going to complete it. Yes. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the implications stacking rapidly now, so he waited, watched. Let me do the work. And now you've reached the point where you can see it, she said. Ethan let out a breath, so now he steps in. Yes, the room fell quiet again. But this time it wasn't confusion or even tension, it was something sharper, recognition. Ethan moved back to the table and picked up one of the map fragments again, tracing the lines with his eyes. I've spent years building systems like this, he said. Not wetlands, not cattails, but networks, supply chains, acquisition patterns, growth models. He looked up at her, and I never questioned what they did to the people already there. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Ethan set the fragment down. This man, he's not just protecting something, Ethan said. He's deciding who gets to use it. Yes. And now he wants to decide if I'm part of that. Her silence confirmed it. Ethan straightened, his expression hardening, not with arrogance this time, but with something more controlled. I'm not walking into that meeting as his test subject, he said. Good, she replied. He reached for his jacket, already moving toward the door. Where are you going? She asked. To make sure we're not the only ones who know what this is, he said. She stood quickly. Ethan, he turned back. If he's been controlling this from the shadows, then there are records, Ethan said. Patterns, transactions, land movements. He didn't just disappear, he operated. And if you dig too fast? She asked. Ethan held her gaze. Then he'll know I'm not playing his game. She stepped closer, her voice lower now, and that's exactly when people like him stop talking. Ethan didn't flinch. Then I won't give him time to decide, he said. The determination in his voice was new, not reckless, not impulsive, calculated. He stepped outside into the fading light, pulling out his phone again as he walked toward his car. His mind had already shifted into a different mode, the one that built strategies, that saw patterns others missed. But this time the stakes weren't just financial, they were personal. He dialed a different number, a contact he hadn't used in years. Someone who specialized in tracing hidden transactions and off-record land deals. The line picked up after a few rings. I need a history, Ethan said without preamble. Wetland acquisitions across this county. Private surveys, unfilled reports. Anything that doesn't show up in standard records. A pause. That's not small work, the voice replied. I'm not asking for small, Ethan said. I'm asking for everything. Another pause. Then give me a name. Ethan hesitated, because for the first time he realized something uncomfortable. He didn't have one. Then give me a pattern, the voice said. Ethan looked back toward the house, toward the swamp beyond it, toward the invisible network he was only just beginning to understand. And then he said the only thing he could. Find me whoever's been buying land without ever needing to own it. Silence on the other end, longer this time. Then, that's not how this works, the voice said quietly. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Then tell me how it does. Another pause, and then the answer came. Low, careful. People who don't need to own land usually aren't the ones making the deals. Ethan went still, because suddenly this wasn't just about a hidden map. It was about someone who had never needed to appear on it at all. The land looked the same. Morning light stretched across the wet grass, catching in shallow pools of water that reflected the sky like broken mirrors. The cattails moved gently in the breeze, their soft tops swaying in quiet rhythm. Nothing about it screamed value, nothing about it looked like power, and yet everything had changed. Ethan stood at the edge of the swamp, boots sinking slightly into the damp ground, his hands resting loosely at his sides. For the first time in years, he wasn't calculating. He was observing. Behind him, the gravel crunch of footsteps approached slowly. His mother didn't rush anymore. She didn't need to. They finalized it this morning, Ethan said without turning. She stopped beside him, following his gaze across the land. I figured they would. The regulatory board had ruled in full. The suppressed survey was verified. The archived drafts, the financial trails, the testimony, it had all held. The broker's firm lost its acquisition rights immediately. Their pending deals were frozen. Licensing reviews were already underway. Not dramatic, not loud, but final. They won't be back, Ethan added. His mother let out a quiet breath, not relief exactly, something steadier. No, she said, they won't. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A few weeks ago, Ethan would have filled the silence. He would have explained the outcome, broken down the implications, translated everything into metrics and projections. Now he let the silence stay, because this time it wasn't empty, it was enough. He stepped forward into the edge of the swamp, reaching down to pull a single cattail from the thick cluster. He turned it in his hands, studying it with a focus that felt completely different from the way he used to look at land. Not as an asset, not as a number, but as something that had always been doing its work, whether anyone noticed or not. I ran the projections again, he said after a while. His mother glanced at him. Of course you did. He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. Habit. And Ethan looked back out at the land. If scaled properly, this place could turn into a multi-million-dollar operation within a few years, he said. Cattail fiber, root processing, sustainable harvesting contracts. The demand is already there. It's just overlooked. She nodded slowly. Your grandfather knew that, yes. Ethan paused, then added, quieter this time, so did you. She didn't respond to that directly. Instead, she bent down, gathering a small bundle of cattails the way she had done countless times before. The motion was simple, practiced. Not a performance, just work. Ethan watched her for a moment. Then, without saying anything, he stepped forward and did the same. The movement felt awkward at first. His hands weren't used to it. His grip was too tight, his motions too careful. But he adjusted. Slowly, silently, they worked side by side, the only sound the soft rustle of plants and distant birds. After a while, he spoke again. I'm not expanding, he said. She didn't stop what she was doing. No large-scale acquisition, no corporate structure, no outside investors, he said. If this becomes something, it stays here. Now she looked at him. That's not how you usually do things, I know. He met her gaze. That's the point. There was no argument in her expression, no pushback, just a quiet understanding that settled between them. He continued, I'll set up the legal structure, protect the land properly, make sure no one can manipulate zoning again. But after that, he exhaled, it grows at its own pace. She studied him for a long second. Your grandfather would have liked that, she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. I'm not doing it for him. No, she agreed. You're not. He looked down at his hands, at the dirt pressed into his palms, at the fibers clinging to his sleeves. These were not the hands he had built his reputation on, but they felt more honest. There's one more thing, he said. She waited. I'm filing a statement, he said, public record, about the report, about what was suppressed. Her brow tightened slightly. That will bring attention. Yes, and attention brings people, I know. She straightened slowly, holding the bundle of cattails against her side. Then why do it? Ethan hesitated. Because the old version of him would have avoided that risk, would have kept the information private, controlled the narrative quietly, protected the advantage. But that wasn't the choice in front of him anymore. Because it wasn't just about us, he said. There are other places like this, other landowners who don't know what they have, or who are being pushed the same way. Her expression shifted. Not pride, not exactly, something deeper. You want them to see it too, she said. Yes, and if they come for this land again, Ethan didn't look away. Then they won't be coming for something hidden anymore, he said. They'll be coming for something protected. She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once. That's different. It is. They returned to the quiet work. Time passed without either of them marking it. The sun climbed higher, the air warmed, the swamp moved the same way it always had. Unbothered, unrushed. Eventually, Ethan straightened, looking out over the land one more time. For years he had believed success meant finding what others missed and taking it before they could see it. Now he understood something else. Some things weren't meant to be taken, they were meant to be understood and protected. His mother walked ahead of him toward the house, carrying what she had gathered. He followed a few steps behind, not out of distance this time, but out of choice, not leading, not correcting, just walking with her. At the edge of the porch, he paused and looked back one last time. The swamp didn't look like profit, it didn't look like opportunity, it didn't look like anything that would have made his old self stop. But it held something far more valuable than that, something he had almost erased. He stepped up onto the porch, setting the cattails down beside hers. For a brief moment, their hands brushed. She didn't pull away, neither did he, and that was enough. If you had stood where he once stood, would you have trusted the numbers, or the person who refused to sell?